Hi guys, Artie here, and it turns out that the Checkered Past block on Adult Swim is on its way out. Starting on June 30th, which is a Monday, no Checkered Past programming is scheduled and instead it starts with King of the Hill at 5 PM, according to the official Turner API scheduling information. I can't say I didn't see this coming like 2 miles down the road, the signs were obvious. The block was originally supposed to continue into July with Billy and Mandy replacing Ed, Edd and Eddy on June 23rd. So it was a decision that was made recently this month and not planned in advance. The show will still air that week, but for that week only before they pull the plug. First, they gutted Toonami Rewind in late December, then Acme Night 2 days later for their own reasons, which I've talked about in a previous video. Feel free to check it out. Then not even the next day later, Checkered Past was slashed down to just a mere hour. There were signs early on that the block wasn't gonna make it, especially with how infrequently Adult Swim rotated the shows, and how they showcased the niche shows only like once every 6 months. In my own personal opinion and contrary to popular belief, I believe Checkered Past would have been more successful if they took more risks instead of playing it safe and staying boring for almost the entirety of the block's run. They simply failed to adapt and keep up with it, so viewers started to get bored and tuned out after seeing the same 4 shows: Dexter's Lab, The Eds, Billy and Mandy, and Courage for almost 2 years. It's a shame really the block didn't last long enough for them to show Dexter's Lab Ego Trip and Ed and Eddy's Big Picture show. It would have been a spectacular way for the block to go out with a bang instead of automatically and unceremoniously being replaced with King of the Hill. They hardly ever rotated in and out any other shows besides the main core 4 shows. Even when they did introduce something new like Samurai Jack, it only lasted 3 to 4 weeks for reasons that were never explained. Even if the block wanted to only encapsulate pre-2004 Cartoon Network, there were still a boatload of other shows to pick and choose from. They got too lazy, twice as fast, and in half the time as Nick Rewind. Except with that block, they didn't have the same limitations as Adult Swim. Checkered Past should have been more balanced where they still played it a little bit safe by focusing on the 4 core shows the most, but they should have broadcast on Saturdays, and also kept the Friday marathon block to highlight the niche content, so that way the schedule wasn't too bizarre for modern audiences, and also not too stagnant at the same time. They were too chicken to air other shows from their library. I believe they only aired the pilot to Johnny Bravo, but don't want to touch the actual series with a 60-foot pole. What I think is that they could have gone even further with the concept by expanding to old school Adult Swim series from the early days of the block, such as Home Movies and C-Lab 2021. You know, like that Adult Swim Rewind stunt they did a couple of years ago. Have an hour of the CN classics and then an hour of Adult Swim classics. There's countless shows they could have worked with that would take all day to list. It would be nice to see Harvey Birdman or the Oblongs on TV again. Despite the stagnation not even a year into the block, it was neat how they presented some obscure, niche, and a few arguably underrated gems such as Evil Con Carne and the What a Cartoon Show to modern audiences on the block. At one point they wanted Cow and Chicken to be the 5th core show, but they eventually gave up and didn't even finish that show's run. Presumably because it didn't get the ratings they expected. Who knows, maybe the classic CN shows will move back to the 6 AM slot on Cartoon Network, like Courage did back in fall 2015. Even better if MeTV Toons finally has the guts to air cartoons during the late night hours, so that way each generation is represented perfectly and people of all viewing habits can enjoy the network. If the death of Checkered Past actually resulted in that, it would be great. I've explained this before, but Warner Bros. Discovery has this strange rule where kids shows and adult shows cannot air on the same channel, since Cartoon Network and Adult Swim are treated as separate networks, and they have to wait a certain amount of time before they can migrate a show to a network of a different age group for advertising purposes. So the reason is pretty much advertisers. So that means after a few months, the CN Classics can return to Boomerang at the ever so convenient 4 AM Eastern time slot, like it did before the Checkered Past block even existed, but I doubt they will since apparently Cartoon Network shows get poor ratings on Boomerang for some reason, so it's unlikely they'll air there. The sad fact of the matter is that Adult Swim doesn't need Checkered Past anymore now that they got Family Guy back, which is a guaranteed stable rating source in any situation. It's also partially the reason why Toonami Rewind got the axe, in addition to lack of strategy. Not to mention, when Checkered Past started in August 2023, they were about to lose the rights to Bob's Burgers until Disney/FX allowed them to renew the rights at the last minute, and also gained seasons 9 through 12. Oh, and another thing. Starting in late June along with the removal of Checkered Past, American Dad will no longer air during primetime slots and instead will be moved to late nights at 1:30 to 3:30 a.m. Boy, do I feel bad for American Dad. They've been getting the bad end of the stick lately with having the reruns slashed to just an hour a day and constantly being moved around the schedule. Adult Swim used to treat the show like royalty ever since TBS picked up the show in 2014. I wonder if it has to do with Fox picking up the show for the next season. Ever since Family Guy has returned to the channel, it's basically dethroned American Dad and always gets the spotlight along with Bob's Burgers and now King of the Hill. Don't get me wrong, they're all great shows with their ups and downs as I am a Fox cartoon enjoyer myself. However, they are really overdoing it. They should be giving each show a reasonable amount of reruns rather than overdoing it like this, where each show gets over 2 hours of airtime daily. Maybe have an hour of King of the Hill, then Futurama, then Bob's Burgers, then American Dad, and then Family Guy, and then finally Adult Swim Originals for the remainder of the night, excluding the repeat Encore 2 AM slots. They became too reliant on the Fox shows to the point where the PM hours of Adult Swim feel like an FXX clone, since that channel has all seasons of those shows except for American Dad, which I have a feeling they'll get the rights to someday. But hey, at least on the bright side, they have tons of new original series and new seasons of shows planned to air later this year and into next year. What I'm thinking is that they may utilize the 5 PM hour as a spot to premiere the upcoming regular show Lost Tape series, if they actually do decide to show it there and not on Hulu or HBO Max or during normal CN hours. Just a thought. I doubt this is the way it'll play out, but it sounds like a neat strategy and could get decent ratings given regular show's popularity. However, the thing is that AS originals other than Rick and Morty rate poorly before midnight, which is the reason why they gave up and reverted back to solely Fox shows every time they tried to experiment after a week or two. They've even tried it with newer shows like Unicorn Warriors Eternal and My Adventures with Superman 2 years ago, and I believe that's the last time they attempted something like that. In summary, it's sad that the Checkered Past block had high hopes and ambitions, but failed to adapt and keep up with the schedule instead of rotating a wider variety of shows or possibly expanding when they had the opportunity to do so. Many people at first thought it was doomed from the start, but I was more optimistic at the time it launched. Even though the block failed, it was an interesting experiment, and it was nice to see some of these long since ended classics air again regularly after being absent from the network for over a decade. Times change, that's all I can say. With cable slowly dying and ratings descending faster than Malaysia Flight MH370 at 8:30 AM local time, the network is doing all they can to maximize ratings, which means more Fox shows. Oh yeah, and they also laid off about 40% of the programming team over at Cartoon Network. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, notify, and check out other videos on the channel. You may like them. Do you think Checkered Past was doomed from the start because of the circumstances, or did they have a chance to adapt and expand their offerings but failed to do so? Let me know in the comments.